This video is brought to you by one of my favorite things, something I use every single day, and that thing is Audible. Stick around to the end of the video for a special offer they're making available through my channel, or visit audible.com/skillup. That's audible.com/skillup. Well, they pulled it off. Final Fantasy VII is a soaring, inspired, heartfelt, breathless retelling of the opening act of the Final Fantasy VII saga. It seemed to me almost impossible that with so much legacy, so much hype, and so much on the line that Square Enix could rise to the occasion and deliver. But they did it, by God, the absolute mad lads, they actually did it. Final Fantasy VII Remake is almost everything I had hoped it would be, and I haven't cried this many nerd tears in a long, long time. Okay, firstly, let's talk spoilers. Now, I know how much this game means to people. If you are sensitive to spoilers, don't watch any reviews, and don't watch any trailers either, because Jesus Christ, that last trailer from Square, really gave away a lot of shit, okay? So just steer clear of all that and play the game, okay? I'm going into this review assuming that you've never played Final Fantasy VII before, so I won't be discussing any major plot points. I will be showing you a variety of boss battles, so if you don't want to see them, you can just listen to this video as you would a podcast. I won't be showing you any of the biggest, most climactic cinematics, but I will be showing you some of the smaller moments, so I can showcase to you and everyone what makes this game tick and why I love it so much. But as I said, if you want zero spoilers, then no review will be able to do that, this one included. Secondly, let's ask and answer the most asked questions about Final Fantasy VII Remake so that they're out of your mind for the rest of the review. Number one, how long is the game? I played this game on normal difficulty. I only died a handful of times. I did every single side quest except for one where I was only missing one collectible, I think. There are 18 chapters in this game. I was level 35 when I finished. All told, I finished this game in 35 hours. We will talk more about game length throughout the review. Number two, where does the game end? Now, this is not a spoiler. The developers have been very clear about the fact that this game is set entirely in Midgar. If you're familiar with the Final Fantasy VII story, you can guess where the game will end, and you will be largely correct. Number three, is there an end game? Sort of. When you finish the game, the credits will roll, and then after that, you gain access to chapter selection, allowing you to replay specific parts of the game. With this comes a hard difficulty that gives you access to some unlockables. There's also some combat challenges accessible through a VR simulator thing. Number four, was the decision to chop up this saga into multiple games worth it, or was it a cynical cash-in? Look, here's the thing. I expect this to be a fairly divisive, controversial game with a lot of people, particularly with the core fandom. There are plenty of choices that Square have made that are going to disappoint or frustrate or piss off fans who have spent their lives loving these characters and this world. I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. I'm just going to say that's not my experience. I left my preconceptions at the door and I just trusted Square to tell this story the way they wanted to tell it in 2020. And while it isn't perfect, I just loved it so much. I really did. And I feel like if you can sort of leave those preconceptions at the door, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to love it as well. Final Fantasy VII Remake tells the story of Cloud, an ex-soldier who decided he was too pretty for the service, so he turned his oversized sword to mercenary work. Through chance and happenstance, he ends up with buff Danny Glover and an assortment of waifus who turn parts of Final Fantasy VII into Pick Me, the video game. Together they set about on a daring mission to bring down Shinra, the evil conglomerate who are extracting the lifeblood of the planet for nefarious purposes such as lighting and heating. And this is where my appreciation for Final Fantasy VII Remake begins, right here at the start, where you're offered a more balanced view of the proceedings than most other games dare to provide. Barrett sermonizing on environmentalism seems like it's pulled straight from today's headlines.
Mako is the lifeblood of our world. The planet bleeds green like you and me bleed red. The hell you think's gonna happen when it's all gone, huh? Answer me!
But rather than just rest on the laurels of the moral superiority of their cause, Square doesn't shy away from reminding us who these people really are. Literal terrorists. They are going into a power plant to send it full Chernobyl. Square doesn't gloss over this point. Instead, the game goes to great lengths to spell out the villainy of their actions, its selfishness, and the risk it poses to the lives of innocent civilians. It also delves deep into the internal conflict within the characters, who struggle in their own way with what they're doing, and if it's really as just as they all convince themselves it is. Final Fantasy XIV recently told a brilliant, nuanced tale that perfectly balanced the goals of the protagonists against the goals of the antagonists. The same depth and deftness is on display here as well. I was also impressed at just how adult Final Fantasy VII Remake is. This isn't a kid's game, this isn't a Saturday morning cartoon with a 2020 coat of paint, this isn't sanitized so as not to be risky or controversial. In particular, the red light district of Walmart showcases income inequality, organized crime, the sex trade, and you may or may not be able to pay for the intimate services of this woman in a scene that I am sure will become legendary.
So, which course will it be? Then make your way to the room in the back and wait. Cloud? This exclusive treatment is reserved for our most well-to-do patrons.
This is a well-written game. There's a quality to every cutscene, every interaction that feels so authentic to the world and to the characters. It's not reaching for the Red Dead or Last of Us levels of realism and emotional pain, it's reaching for high school drama, but a really good one, like Degrassi. You guys remember Degrassi, right?
They didn't.
As I've gotten older, I've struggled more and more with JRPG dialogue, finding it too forced, too wooden, too cringy. I just never felt this way in the VII Remake. The writing was so on point that I felt so drawn in, and I hung off almost every word. The voice acting cast deserves so much credit here. Barrett's voice is ridiculously over the top, but he provides so much energy and heart and range. Within just a few minutes of meeting him, you love this big lug. Jesse's energy and optimism leap off the screen. Aerith's purity and idealism perfectly balances Cloud's coldness and cynicism. And Tifa.
Our house special, the Cosmo Canyon.
Beautiful.
I gotta go.
I also just laughed so much in this game. I mean, Final Fantasy has always been kind of funny, but this really nails it with a lot of subtle humor that lands perfectly.
Due to an emergency, entry into this area is prohibited. Sorry for the inconvenience.
You call that a warning?
Entry into this area is prohibited. Please, leave at once.
Still too nice.
This area is off limits. Turn around and leave at once. If you don't, I'll have no choice but to use...
Now you're getting the hang of it!
On a macro level, Final Fantasy games have a rich tradition of going completely off the rails sometimes, with weird side plots and cameo characters and crazy bullshit that doesn't really make sense, but the remake is largely free of that. You're never going to struggle understanding what's going on, and as the story gets bigger in scale, you can tell the writers still had their hands firmly on the wheel. There's obviously going to be a big discussion about how much the remake honors the source material versus riffing on it versus ignoring it completely. I would say that overall, there's a genuine commitment to the original here. There are changes, there's a lot of license taken at key moments, or with a few characters, but on balance, what I think you'll find is a deeper dive into the source material, rather than it being changed up or glossed over for the sake of being new. This isn't local theatre does modern take on Shakespearean classic. This is Final Fantasy VII, and with source material this revered, this was totally the right call. The deeper dive and expanded detail are necessary because the Final Fantasy VII Remake tells just the first part of the Final Fantasy VII story. Where the original game took about 5 or 6 hours to get through Midgar, the remake spends a full 35 hours there. So the question is, how did they stretch it out like this, and was it worth it? Final Fantasy VII Remake is set entirely in the city of Midgar. There are 18 chapters to the game, and around 13 of those are linear mission-based chapters, where you have to go to a place and do a thing, standard stuff. The remaining 4 or 5 chapters are your open world chapters. In these, you'll be dropped into one of the 3 hub areas in Midgar, where you'll have the chance to complete side quests. There are 2 slum areas and the Red Light District Wall Market. As you reach these new areas, you're confined to them, but in the later chapters of the game, you have the chance to go anywhere you like by either walking there or using the handy Chocobo fast travel network. The structure of the world is sure to disappoint some. It's easiest to think of Midgar as 3 districts connected by linear arteries like highways or junkyards. They look very tunnel-like, which is a criticism that was leveled against Final Fantasy XIII, and it really stuck. I'm gonna say that I didn't love the structure of Midgar as an open world city. Its hubs are interesting enough to walk around and gawk at, but there isn't a whole lot going on in those spaces. They don't feel particularly lived in or organic. The connecting spaces are just, yeah, it's really nothing special. I feel like there would have been a way to build a Midgar that felt more like a real city, something bigger, more singular, more seamlessly connected, like a GTA city or something from Assassin's Creed Odyssey, or I don't know, something. In the remake, Midgar feels like a human body with its discrete organs connected by arteries and not a whole lot going on in between them. The next big question is, how good are the side quests? And yeah, they're not the best either. They're your standard like find the kids who are missing around the town, find the cats that are missing around town, change the ventilator filters that are broken around town, go to this place and kill the bad guy, etc. Luckily, it never descends into the open world fetch and kill quest that Final Fantasy XV was so filled with, but it still feels rather generic. We've seen it before, it isn't new, it isn't interesting, but it's fine. The good news is that it's totally optional. I did every single one of them, and you really don't have to do them if you don't want to, and I'll be honest, they really don't add much. If you're looking to just experience the Final Fantasy VII Remake story, you can get through this game in around 30 hours-ish, and you really wouldn't be missing anything versus the person who spent the additional 5 hours completing all the side content. When it comes to world design and side quest design, I want to acknowledge how difficult a task the team at Square had on their hands. If you make your game too open, you'll get into Final Fantasy XV territory, where vast tracts of empty, pointless space demand boring, repetitive open world kill quests. Go too linear and you get into the Final Fantasy XIII territory, now cynically remembered as a corridor simulator. The remake walks a fine balance between these two that feels like a compromise rather than a fresh new vision for the franchise. There's a lot of opportunity to do this better in part 2 of the remake saga. But there's a saving grace for all of these open world sections that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's the waifu selection minigame that you'll be playing in your head throughout them. Accompanied by either Tifa, Jessie, or Aerith, each of these sections is essentially a dating game dressed up as an open world chapter, where you'll have the chance to blush repeatedly while these thirsty ladies flirt with you relentlessly and compete for your affection.
Guess I'll take one for the team and be your back warmer again.
You okay?
Yeah.
Fine, but it'll cost you a lot.
A lot, huh? One date ought to do it.
All jokes aside, I loved this. I loved this a lot, in fact. It was so funny, it was so charming, it was so damn kawaii. It was just one of the highlights of the game for me. It felt like you were playing through some sort of anime rom-com, and because it was so well written and the performances were so strong, you couldn't help but be drawn in by it. When moments like these were happening, I was glad that Square took the decision to break up the saga and deliver it in parts. There were so many new scenes and moments that weren't in the original that were added here, and they deepened my connection to each of these characters. I love that the game had these sections so it could take its time with this character development, because these quiet moments were absolutely my favorite parts of the game. But you can't help but feel that the game is stretched out needlessly, and that there's a fair amount of fat that could have been trimmed here, and I think that's very clear when we look at some of the mission design in the other chapters. Final Fantasy VII Remake has around 13 chapters which are essentially missions. You'll start at one point, you'll make your way to another, fight some trash mobs, a boss or two, watch some cutscenes, and then on to the next chapter. Final Fantasy XIII is famous for its linear, repetitive, corridor simulator design, and I feel like some people will level the same criticisms at the remake. Most of the levels are very linear, so if you were looking for a more open plan style of mission design, the remake won't be for you. What it does better is dress that linearity up to make it sometimes feel less linear. The train yard sequence here is essentially a linear path, but because of the environment design, it doesn't feel as linear. Contrast this with stuff like the sewers or the rail line, and yeah, a whole bunch of other places as well. You can see why people might be having FF13 flashbacks. The biggest issue here is actually environmental design, which I think falls down quite often. The rail line and sewer examples I gave earlier were among the worst of it, but there's plenty of other bland space that you'll spend way too long in. When the remake is firing on all cylinders, its environments are absolutely knockout stunning, which makes the contrast to these less inspired locations feel all the more stark. There's a big problem with pacing in the game. Some of these areas just go on forever and ever, and you really do get over some of them well before you're through with them. You get the feeling that Square were looking to maximize the total playtime rather than delivering the best moment-to-moment experience that they could. Part of what makes these areas feel especially slow and painful is the environmental gimmicks that are used. Cloud & Co. will often have to squeeze through spaces in excruciatingly slow transitions, which I guess are used to disguise loading, maybe? There are sections where you have to operate cranes and machinery that are so slow and boring. There's some other examples as well, but yeah, it really feels like Square is making this stuff longer than it should be, pumping the brakes hard and often. The last thing is that there's some reuse of spaces and bosses that just feels so needless. There's literally an entire chapter devoted to going back to the sewers that you've already cleared and fighting a boss that you have already killed. I was like, why is this in the game? Like, what was this? Cut this, it's not needed. So yeah, there's some padding there, no doubt. Luckily though, even at its most linear, its most dull, and its most drawn out, I was still enjoying myself because the combat in this game is so fucking good. It's no exaggeration to say that I never ever got tired of combat in Final Fantasy VII Remake. The game's combat is just, it's just such a brilliant, fresh take on turn-based combat, and make no mistake, this is turn-based. Your basic attacks look flashy as hell with their wide variety of animations and particle effects, but they don't do all that much other than charge your ATB bar. With that, you can essentially pause combat to issue commands, which is where you'll start doing real damage. Where this combat shines the brightest is in the delicate balance between action and strategy. Square has designed a framework that looks as good as it plays. You can go through combat by mindlessly holding the attack button and spamming the same one or two moves over and over. Playing this way is going to be really long and painful and dull. Instead, you have to assess your enemy to find their weaknesses, use the right spells to exploit those weaknesses, use the right abilities to either deal damage or build stagger, and unleash hell when your enemy is down to maximize your efficiency. Character customization and progression is also well done. It isn't particularly deep or complex, but unlocking new weapons and abilities and new stats for your weapons and new equipment and new materia all happens at a satisfying pace and allows you to configure your team to your liking. It must be said that there are some issues with combat for sure. Camera is often horrendous. It seems like it has a life of its own at times, and given that some of the combat spaces aren't particularly large, things can get pretty funky pretty fast. This is especially the case since enemies target whoever you are controlling, and if those enemies are off screen, you really can't see what they're about to do to you. This becomes even more frustrating since their attacks can often interrupt you even after you've issued a command. So you might have made the tactical decision to save up 2 ATB bars for a big group heal or whatever, but just as you cast it, you're interrupted, wasting both of those bars and leaving you very exposed. Luckily, the game has been tuned in recognition of these issues. Enemies deal just the right amount of damage to make things challenging, but never so much that it feels unfair. Boss battles are long but never feel drawn out so long as you're playing properly. When the party HP is low, it's a genuine challenge to safely get everyone back up to full health without it feeling unfair or oppressive. And the boss battles, man, like, what? I'm only showing you a few of them in this video. There are dozens more. They are so good. They are just so fun and big and just, oh man, they're just so hype. I love them. Yeah, I mean, I can't wait for you guys to see them. Yeah, they're fantastic. Overall, combat is a standout achievement here. While there's going to be a lot of discussion about the more controversial aspects of this game, I expect combat is one area where almost everyone will be on the same page. It's just that good. So in summing up this video, I want to offer my final thoughts on that question of like, was it right for Square to chop this up into multiple games instead of doing the whole thing in one game? Okay, here's what I think. I played this game for 35 hours. Based on what I completed and how it was structured and the overall pacing, I expect there to be 2 more games in this series. I expect it to be a trilogy. I loved the way that part 1 of this remake establishes itself as an opening act. It perfectly introduces the characters, showcases the world, and sets the tone. Its ending is a great, satisfying ending that gives a natural point of conclusion while also setting up for what comes next. I also appreciate the fact that with more total playtime available, the story has been given more chance to breathe, allowing for a closer look at certain aspects of the story and for stronger bonds to be built between you and the characters. These aspects all seem to vindicate Square's controversial choice. The flip side to this is that you could have done all of this without the uninspired open world, without the generic side quests, without the stretched out main missions, or the reused areas and bosses. You could have delivered all of the best parts of this package in a lean 20 hours, and then you could have delivered the other 2 parts as well for a total of, 60 to 80 hours, and then yeah, it's all in one package. I'm not going to tell you what you should think because I know that everyone will have a different view on this, but here's what I think. I loved this. I loved this a lot. I loved almost every part of it. Even the parts that weren't great, I was still enjoying myself, and the parts that were great, they were just... Oh man, when they first revealed the Final Fantasy VII Remake, reveal, whatever, at E3 all those years ago, like I literally teared up because I was like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe they're doing this. And playing through this game, I had so many of those moments where I just had those like nerd tears welling up. Yeah, it's just full of those, or at least it was for me. The quiet affection between Tifa and Cloud, the heart that Barrett wears on his sleeve, the steely determination in Aerith's voice as she stares down her destiny, the growth of Cloud from a selfish, uncaring jerk to a leader who would risk anything for his friends. There are moments in this game so fucking heroic that I would literally leap from my chair and like fist pump Barrett style. Final Fantasy VII Remake is a game that can and will be torn down by many people for its business model and its minor shortcomings, but it will also be held up by many others for the sheer love and joy of it all. I say, well done Square. I think you pretty much nailed it, and I cannot wait for part 2. Hello, hope you're doing well out there. Crazy times right now. Everyone's stuck at home. Not much to do, I guess. I guess there's 2 things I've been doing personally. One, playing a lot of games, which is, a thing that I do in general. That's my job. The other thing I've been doing is listening to a lot of Audible, which is something I used to do when I could go outside in the before times, but now it's just what I do when I'm inside, playing games, like playing Animal Crossing at the moment while also listening to Audible. So let's talk about Audible. Audible has the world's largest selection of audiobooks and audio entertainment, including Audible Originals, which are stories created exclusively for audio, including documentaries, exclusive audiobooks, and scripted shows that you can't hear anywhere else. With the convenient Audible app, you can listen at any time, anywhere, on any device, like mobile or Alexa or Bluetooth and more. Every month, you can choose 1 audiobook, regardless of its price, as well as 2 Audible Originals from a fresh selection, and you get to keep your library of titles forever, even if you cancel your subscription. So you might be wondering what I'm reading at the moment. You probably aren't, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I just finished my Napoleon the Great documentary by Andrew Roberts. Very good, by the way. After that, I read The Hero's Journey and The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which is a book by Joseph Campbell on the way that all the myths that we have across all human history are basically like the same story, just told in different ways. Really fascinating. I'm rereading one of my favorite books ever called Birds of Prey by Wilbur Smith, not the DC movie. It's a book by a guy called Wilbur Smith, and it's very, very good. I'm reading something called On Writing Well by William Zinsser, and I just started reading Star Wars The Old Republic by my favorite games writer, Drew Karpyshyn. I haven't read that for some reason, but I feel like I need some good Star Wars in my life right now. I need some good escapism, and Drew's always been great for that. That's my library. There's lots more, obviously. I mean, it's Audible, man. There's just tons of it. Start listening with a 30-day Audible trial. Choose 1 audiobook and 2 Audible originals absolutely free. Visit audible.com/skillup. That's SKILLUP. So yeah, check it out, guys. Like I've always said, more books is better. Our lives are always better the more books we are consuming, especially now, I guess. So yeah, check it out. Thank you very much, Audible, for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching it. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.